What is going on, everybody? Welcome to Robeytech. I'm actually here. I'm just going to jump to the screen right now because I want to make sure that you guys know that this is a very, very special version. We got JJ in the house. It's going to be a lot of fun. We are going to be talking about all the cool things that we got to see at Computex, but you get the full behind the scenes and the full rundown. The good thing is about waiting how long we've had is JJ's had a chance to get his voice back, because most of the time when we go back, actually the Computex this year wasn't so bad, was it, JJ? Your voice actually survived pretty well, I feel like, for Computex compared to CES.
I would agree, yeah. I mean, historically, I don't do that great at events, especially I think at CES, but part of the reason why is the humidity. And, you know, in Taiwan, Computex, it was definitely quite a bit more humid, and I made it a point to kind of just keep making sure to hydrate. So I held my own, I think, pretty well from the start all the way to the end, definitely compared to CES sometimes where it's a little bit more challenging.
So for those of you who are joining us for the first time, and I know that you guys, a lot of people are just joining us now as we start to, we see the numbers climb healthily, which is always a good thing. Yes, what is happening today is we are going to spend some time just going through all of the cool stuff that we got to see at Computex. You guys get the, essentially the booth experience, because JJ's there as we walk through B-roll or as he shows things from his own studio. So you guys will kind of get to see all the stuff that ASUS has basically, some of the stuff that, not everything, but some of the stuff that ASUS and ROG presented during Computex. And then we're gonna let JJ go, and then we're gonna build in their brand new Hyperion, their Hyperion GR701 BTF system. So we're gonna build that full thing. And then we're gonna give away the actual GT302 BTF system, which we were the first people, I think, to get to live stream it. So we're gonna give that one away live here on the show as well.
Give away too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's almost a $2,500 system. We're just gonna give away just to make you guys enjoy and have a good time. In terms of the giveaways and stuff like that, it all happens near the end. You just got to stay through. There may be other opportunities to win stuff along the way. You never know. Last time JJ surprised us and was like, hey, let's give away a couple LC3s. But you never know. That's the thing. So you're going to want to stick around. It should be a lot of fun. Yeah, so JJ, we kind of have a plan. We have a strategy we kind of talked about. But when you think about Computex and your guys' next year, and kind of looking at ASUS and ROG moving forward, what do you think, if you could put it in a sentence, what would you say the future looks like for you guys?
So, I mean, the future is packed. You know, I think the main reason why is, I've been with the company now for 16 years, and I think one of the things that's crazy is when I started the company, we used to put out this magazine. It was called ASUS World. If anybody kind of has ever used a phone book, they were really big and thick. And when I came in, we were already making a book, and the book was like this thick. And now that book would be absolutely huge. And how I think that aligns with ROG is, we're only halfway through the year, and we've got a huge number of product launches. I mean, even today's announcement of a monitor that you're actually going to be taking a look at very shortly, right? You've already got in hand with our new flagship ROG Swift OLED PG32 UCDP, right? And so that's just an example. We have everything now from, of course, our gaming monitors, which we're known for. We've got gaming routers, we've got our motherboards, graphics cards, we've got amazing peripherals, which we showcased at Computex, right? We've got gaming gear accessories that we've gotten into. So I think that's the thing from us, is it's comparatively in the past where it might have just made maybe kind of a couple of key products. Literally, there's so much exciting stuff that we're always working on, and it's always fun that if you're a PC DIY enthusiast, you love stuff that's cool, interesting, dynamic, and innovative, we're always, I think, going to have something of interest for you guys.
Yep. In fact, you're talking about one of them right here that we actually got to show at CES last year. And this is the second one we actually ended up getting. This is the RT-AXX57 Go. And you know who I was talking to about this, JJ, was Trent the Traveler. I don't know if you know who he is. Guy who lives out of his van. You guys actually sponsor him.
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, we were talking about this, and I was like, hey, yeah. So we were talking about the fact that you can actually use this to unify multiple. So if your one drops, you have a second one as a backup and all this other stuff. And given how much we stream, this was starting to become into all of our streaming kits as our go-to router. So that way we can have multiple infusions of internet connection. So if something goes down, we're always up, because we keep trying to stream from all over the world. Like you said, we keep trying to challenge ourselves and be on the edge. And there's a lot of ASUS stuff that kind of powers that backbone for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think, a lot of it is that there's something internally we call design thinking. So that's essentially an internal mandate that we have, that when we go about designing and developing products, we really do try to kind of look at what the users are looking for, and bake that into the product. And even something like you noted with the RT-57 Go there, that pocket travel router, it's great because you don't have to worry about like buying SIMs or anything like that. It doesn't matter whether you have an Android or iOS phone, just take a USB cable, plug it in, and now you have your 4 or 5G cellular connection, hotspot to your own personal Wi-Fi 6 access point, and you're good to go. And now any one of your devices can now make connections there. You get a really robust level of management from the app or from the firmware. So really cool. And also it's not expensive compared to a lot of like portable hotspots, which can be a few $100s. It's $130. It's a great addition to just kind of throw in your bag. And whenever you're going out, if you got a lot of devices to connect to, now you can just use that.
Yeah, and this one, like, again, not something, this was a CES anyway. I just happened to see it because it just had come in with today's shipments with everything else. And I was like, oh yeah, that's so funny, because the last time you were like, hey, you can just take this one with you. And it's been traveling in our kit the entire time. And then we were like, this is like W Tech right here in terms of this stuff. Okay, so let's now talk about Computex, now that we've covered CES randomly in the show. So we talked, first and foremost, we're talking about new AIO solutions, one of which we're actually seeing right here in the GT302 itself, and that's the RG Strix LC3 series. And then now there's this new the eCam. They have like the 3D print cooling solution as well that we kind of covered there. You want to talk a little bit about that, and I can bring up some stuff on that.
Yeah, if you got maybe some of that B-roll to share from a little bit of the both. What we tried to show at actually the both was a little bit of kind of the best of what we're offering right now, and then also a little bit of visibility towards the future. So we've been a leading partner with ASUS in terms of utilizing their solutions. We were the first to market with Gen 7, first to market with Gen 8, and now we're also first to market with the Gen 7 2 solutions, which is what we have with the LC3s. LC3s kind of sitting in our mid-range spot, so below our flagship kind of Ryujin and Ryu models, where it's offering great performance, great ID design. It's going to be in black and white, 240, 360, really great pump performance. It's about I'd say about 2 degrees for about every 100 watts in terms of improvement compared to the kind of Gen 7. Got a little bit more headroom in terms of the pump as well, and it's also a bit quieter. And we have that really cool design, which I think you showed in the build for the GT302, so you guys can pick up the bot on that. But it's got a detachable pump head, so when you're kind of mounting everything, I think it makes it a little bit easier to kind of take that off, get everything mounted in, then you can pop it back on there and you're good to go. If you want to save a little bit of money, you don't have to go with the screen model, and you can go just with the static RGB one. If you want the screen, you can do that. The eCam stuff was really exciting because that was going to be a coordination kind of between us with, of course, also with 2 partners. And the really cool thing is that there's something called additive manufacturing. If you've never heard this term, additive manufacturing essentially is a name for 3D printing. So in traditional cold plate designs, are essentially using skiving. So they're essentially cutting their plates to be able to meet kind of, let's say, their geometry and the topology for their cooling requirements. But there's only so much you can really do in that approach, which is why generally, usually find kind of from generation to generation, there can be uplifts in performance, but they're not usually massive, right? A lot of the value that comes from buying a newer cooler is usually going to be kind of, let's say, holistic, right? So it might be a bit in the ID, it might be in the usability, the noise profile, things like the Ryujin 3, which comes with like daisy chain magnetic fans or like the screen, other things. So it's kind of like a whole value prop. But with eCam, because essentially you can do 3D printing, you can have really customized geometry that is specific to essentially, let's say, the signatures and the layout of the specific target that you want to have. So we know that AMD's topology is different than Intel's topology when it comes to the way that the CPU is designed. So this gives us really great level of flexibility. So this is totally really the next generation of cooling technology that's coming into play. It's going to offer a higher level of performance. It's also going to offer better sustainability because it's far more efficient in terms of what can be done. And I think more interesting, it could be targeted to be hyper specific. And this would be interesting to find out what your thoughts and on what our people's community's perspective is on, would you like to see almost like purpose specific coolers? So imagine like a Strix LC4, but there's an AMD edition, and a Strix LC4, but an Intel edition, right? Which have the additive designs which are specific to each one of those platforms. And we could also even look to maybe incorporate this with things like our LC series and our graphics cards, which have used liquid cooling designs as well. maybe that could be another approach, right? So there's a lot of interesting kind of pathway, very, very cool technology. And I think the last B-roll cut that you showed in there is kind of like a next generation concept. I think a lot of what we're going to talk about kind of can tie in a little bit into BTF. So we did show off, and I might have an image here as well that I can pull up, but we showed off a concept AIO cooler that actually had a foldable OLED display. And part of the goal was to kind of change the layout of the cabling and the look and feel of the screen to try to work better. Yeah, that's a perfect shot of it right there. To kind of align with the BTF aesthetic, right? Where I think there were some people, it's like, hey, can we move out the cable so the cable doesn't seem like it's so apparent? Maybe take more of that centralized space. So you can see here, it's a big, massive size screen. It's pretty much almost like the size of the screen you would see something like on an ROG phone or like a Zen phone. Big, beautiful OLED display, high refresh rate, high resolution. This was over 2K in terms of the resolution.
Wow, okay.
So this is literally super sharp. It might be higher resolution than your monitor, right?
Yeah.
Which is pretty crazy, right? So that is totally still like in design work, so don't expect to see that anytime in the future. But we wanted to use this as kind of opportunity to tell people, hey, we're getting your feedback on BTF. You guys are loving this, and you guys want us to keep evolving this for more product lines. I mean, what were your thoughts when you saw that?
Well, I mean, like, again, I love it was really interesting. It was almost like a problem I never knew I had until I started seeing people doing stuff like, oh yeah, I never thought about how, how not disruptive isn't the right word, disruptive for hoses or anything like that, but all of a sudden when hoses were out of the way or they were put in a different place or all that sort of stuff, that it was like, oh wow, this can actually add up a lot. This can create a lot of like clearing, right? Like in terms of just the visibility, especially in the BTF builds where BTF is trying to have as little visible as absolutely possible. And then the other thing that you also said was interesting as well when you were talking about ASUS, like having an ASUS edition of like the LC4 versus an Intel edition. We have seen that in a lot of cases, we're seeing very different performance in terms of what they can do when they basically are on AMD motherboards versus Intel motherboards specifically. And as people are trying to figure out the best thing in terms of some cooler manufacturers are trying to move where their cold plate's actually sitting and stuff like that. So I feel like people didn't know that was potentially the case, and so that would actually do a better job of helping customers choose AIOs, because one of the things that we've learned as we've talked about it is people are like, I don't really know what to buy, and sometimes they get scared because there's so much information they don't know how to sift through it sometimes.
Yeah,
so,
I think almost having that kind of clarity to know that's like, hey, that's the AMD optimized version, right? I mean, right now it's pretty easy because of course you can just buy one of our coolers and they're already cross compatible, right? But I think that the benefit that you get within this type of design approach is going to be that you can really have a much higher degree of optimization that is specific for that topology, because the reality is that the heat layout, right, how actually heat is distributed and balanced across what's called the IHS, right, for the CPU, it does differ between Intel and AMD's designs, right? And so us being able to purposely design that, right, can give a better experience, right? At the same time too, though, that's an interesting argument for some people that do like to roll over a part. Like I sometimes have had systems and components where you could have a very good AIO and you could roll that over from one system to another. And then would that be the case that you would still be able to roll it over? So there's still some good questions.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think that ultimately, we're excited about, I think, being able to offer such a disruptive technology that really shows, I think, a big opportunity to increase performance, which I think a lot of us are always interested in, right? Is like, hey, helping to bring down temps, helping to bring up clock speeds, and just ultimately give you a better experience, right? So those are some pretty cool, I think, additions that we have. Some other just last notes there on the cooler side. Just in terms of updates, and I don't know if we had B-roll for this, we also showed off a new Prime series AIO. So I know you're very familiar with our Prime series. It's kind of like in our more entry band, or kind of, let's say, mid-range series product offering with Prime series power supplies, chassis, and motherboards. And we recently announced the Computex graphics cards, which we'll touch on a little bit, but also our new Prime AIOs. So these will make up our new entry-level offering. Definitely will be a bit more price aggressive, kind of like if you've seen our Tough Gaming LC2, which I think you guys used in a prior build. That was, right now, that's like about like 140-ish price point. This will be a little bit below that in terms of kind of the price point. We'll have a screen version and a non-screen version as well.
Is this it right here? I think this is it. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that looks like it. One of the main things that I think we'll do with this model is, even though it's at a lower price point, the fan assembly is all unified. So essentially for people that are first time builders that don't want to have to deal as much with a lot of the cabling, since the fans are all essentially grouped together, there's essentially less for you to do, right, in that regard. If you're somebody though that wants to probably like fine tune your system performance or your aesthetic because you want to swap out different fans, not the best choice for you. You would probably want to consider one of our other units, whether it's the Tough Gaming or the ROG Strix or the Ryu or one of those other models that we have, right, where it makes more sense. Where this is kind of like you're really trying to buy in and keep that price point lower because you're trying to keep everything self-contained, if that makes sense. On the kind of the flip side, the higher end side, we are going to also offer an update to our ProArt AIOs, which I know you guys did an awesome ProArt themed build where you guys, I think, did everything in the ProArt ecosystem, and you even used the ProArt LC420 cooler. So we'll have a 360 version that we'll be offering there too. One of the cool things that are different, and I'd love to see some feedback from the community, and also hello to In Need of Temperance. I love that name. That's it's an interesting name. But one of the cool things that we've done there that I don't think any other vendor has done, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that we actually have partnered with a fan manufacturer that's not us to include within our cooler design. So we've done this already with a couple of products, like take for instance the Ryu Jin. We've always had like a Noctua variant, which came with Noctua fans. Of course, the LC420 also came with Noctua IPPC fans. For this go around for the ProArt LC360, it will actually come with Alphacool's Apex metal fans. And the main reason
which you can see them right here, right? Yeah, so we've got that.
The main reason why we picked this one is going to be that these fans offer not only great performance, but the critical thing is their tonality. Most fans, when you start to get over about like 1800 RPM, they tend to have, I would say, a much more notable kind of like hum or type of sound signature. We found with these fans, even at their higher RPM levels, they tend to sound much closer to a lower RPM. So even if it's running like at 18, 19, 2000 RPM, it tends to sound closer to like almost like a 1500 RPM fan.
Right.
And we think that not only gives us, hey, that great balance of thermal performance that you're getting from the fan, but the acoustics. And it being ProArt, it kind of makes sense because you're probably going to have people that might be loading the CPU up more frequently, right? They're running maybe more rendering or heavy encoding, or they're doing stuff that they're going to probably have those fans be driven a bit harder. So having that higher performing fan that also gives you that nicer kind of noise signature is something that we're looking for. So that's going to be an exciting update as well.
And then, so some people, a couple questions said, gee, for how thick is the rad, and is it single or double pass in the rad? I think on any of these, were there any of those? Like, I think that it looks like the rads were about the similar in terms of what the 27
Yeah, so on all of them, we're pretty much using thicker rads, but we don't go to the extremity of some other companies like Arctic. So Arctic notably has very, very thick rads. And I'd love to see your feedback. I mean, you're one of the best guys in the game that does a lot of builds. And for sure, going to a thicker rad gives you much better performance, but you also introduce mechanical compatibility issues because you get to such a thick rad that the Z height, right? Like when you mount in, it starts to eat into a certain amount of clearance space that you can be challenged with. So from our perspective, we feel that the kind of the optimal sweet spot is that 27 millimeter. So that's thicker than kind of the standard that has been around at 25. So you're getting a little bit of an increase. But you also need to balance the thickness of the radiator with the static pressure and the airflow of your fan, right? Because again, the thicker the rad, you also sometimes need to further optimize the fan's performance to be in alignment with the radiator, right? So we're trying to kind of hit the sweet spot. For some of the concept model stuff that we've shown, though, like let's say that next generation ROG cooler, we are evaluating whether we want to do something like what we've done with the Matrix and some of the other radiators, where maybe we would go to even thicker, maybe 30, 30 plus, right? Just because we kind of have a sense that like if you're probably investing into that class of a cooler, you're probably going to go with a bigger chassis. You've got more space. It'll be more forgiving. But I think for the majority of our current product line, like we're talking about with the Strix LC3 series, the Prime series, the ProArt series, we're never going to go over that 27 because we want to try to make sure that pretty much any chassis that you go in right now, it's going to be mechanically interoperable and you won't have like an issue with it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we've had, I for sure have had fitment issues, right? Because I think the one thing is that they've been standard pretty much across the board, and usually you get above 28, you might even get into the 30 to 32 like the Arctics, and then the thick Q60 from Height is a great example of, it really kind of only works in their chassis for the most part sometimes. And then, so then the other thing too is also, the one thing that we've learned is even though they're thicker, if you don't put the right fans, there's actually a lot more that goes into just having a thick radiator than just having a thick radiator, right? Like fan, static pressure, all those other things.
That static pressure and that airflow, right? Because generally the thicker the radiator, you're going to usually need to increase the static pressure performance, right? You also can have other factors like turbulence, which can be sometimes an issue, which can cause kind of like more shuffling sounds and things like that. So there's a lot of little kind of pieces that you have to evaluate to try to make sure to give the whole experience. And that can also be complicated by we're seeing the increased trend to also sometimes go with thicker diameter fans, right? So if you're one of those people that are buying like a thicker fan frame, where fans for a long point of time, and even right now the majority of fans on the market are 25 millimeter, but let's say you buy like a 28 millimeter thick fan, which are now becoming much more popular. You add 28 millimeters to then like a 30 millimeter rad. Now you've double stacked essentially the thickness, right? So now you can have this thicker thing that you have to account for, right?
And it's funny because I saw something from Mean Krampus who was like, hey, I'd love to see more support for push-pull. But even that, like that actually gets into a whole lot of physics in terms of the speed of the fans at the push part versus the pull part. And then if a radiator's too thin, you actually end up with disturbances. And we've done a lot of testing on that. So believe it or not. And then the other two is if you think that stacking is a problem there, all of a sudden when you got two fans plus a thick radiator, it starts to get a whole lot a whole lot better than, a whole lot more complicated than you guys actually might think. Fitment is one of those things that I think is just a genuine issue. I think one of the things that people don't understand, and I think a lot of people come from the world where they're actually very knowledgeable, but for people who are new builders, something like that can really ruin their day when all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, this is hitting the top of my RAM or whatever, right? Like, or, you know, the case actually has a tendency to push, instead of having mounting all the way near the front, it actually has more of a middle.
Yeah,
so
you gotta offset something. Yeah, these are the things that why also it's so great to work with an individual like yourself, and why I tell people you're one of the best channels out there to be able to view for kind of real world user kind of build guidance, because you actually go through the process of kind of putting it together and you find those pain points, or those what I sometimes call as hot spots, that on paper it sounds like everything should work, but then when you do it you don't realize, oh, this thing is obstructed, I can't easily access it. Or thematically, like the look and feel gets really compromised, because like right here I can see all this nice ID work, but then all of a sudden when I have like this push and pull fan config, I literally eat the whole top of the board, and like it has just like a different look that you might not like, right? So exactly, a lot of little things that you just have to ultimately evaluate. And again, from our perspective, we want to try to offer both. We definitely always want to prioritize performance and functionality, but I think interoperability and compatibility is a very important point. Even within, I think, something like the GT302, when, you know, we designed that, to be frank, we looked at very popular options like the 4000D, where the 4000D was a more compressed chassis, where kind of you couldn't necessarily put certain stuff in certain spots. It didn't work as well. And we said, hey, we want to mirror that kind of very popular kind of target spot, but make sure that the volume was maybe a bit easier to work with, right? That top mounting a 360 wasn't going to be an obstructing issue, right? Maybe more internal space for the graphics card. So those are things that we're trying to pay attention to and mindful. And definitely, if people have feedback, always feel free to share that with us. You can also always feel free to email us too. I have an email account that I look at in coordination with our product marketing team that we monitor and also share with our PM and our R&D team, pcdiy@asus.com. So if you ever kind of have some thoughts on things that you see or things you're experiencing and you'd like us to try to take a look at, feel free to drop us a line there.
And then, you know, it's funny, something that you actually said that was actually really interesting is, well, and then we can move kind of on to power and stuff like that. But when you guys think about designing for, whether that's cases, AIOs and stuff like that, given how big the world of PC DIY is, how much like what's the process for, you know, like you guys making sure that it fits on other cases? Like, tell me a little bit about your testing methodologies.
Yeah, so that's actually a really great one. It's quite interesting because when you go about testing, there's a lot of variation to it. Even in like when we're in discussions with you, when we're sending out, you know, product for you guys to review, to be very clear, we don't ever dictate or define anything editorially. So we never tell anybody how they have to test anything, but sometimes we might provide maybe insight at, you know, the different things that we look at when we've tested the product, right? Because for instance, a lot of times people will use like a synthetic, right, as a benchmark for how they want to see thermals, especially for something like a cooler. But if you talk